Let's focus across our border now on President Cyril Ramaphosa in his capacity as head of the SADC organ on politics and security has sent International Relations Deputy Minister Candace Mashego and former Minister Jeff Radebe to Eswatini today. They're part of a SADC delegation sent to meet with King Mswati III. The kingdom, of course, has been rocked by months of pro-democracy protests with a violent crackdown by the army and police. Let's speak now to Southern African Director for Human Rights Watch, Dewa Mavhinga. Dewa, thank you so much for your time. What are the latest reports that you have received on the situation in Eswatini?
Well, we know that the situation in Eswatini is escalating. From yesterday, the police used heavy-handed methods, including firing live ammunition and tear gas to stop nurses and protesters from getting into the city of Mbabane. Many were injured and hospitalized, and several were turned away from the city. There was also internet shutdown on the orders of the regulator. We know that today there has been a tense calmness with a heavy presence of the police and the army, and the Minister of Housing and Urban Development has today banned protests in towns and cities across Eswatini, which might also trigger an escalation in the protests. We know that the biggest problem is that the king and the authorities in Eswatini are not addressing the root causes of the protests. They are being dismissive and using force to silence protesters. And this will not work, as we have seen that there have been continuing relentless protests, and people want their voices to be heard and reforms to be undertaken in Eswatini.
So we have reports of one death in recent weeks, but with reports now, you're telling us live ammunition used just yesterday to break up a pro-democracy protest of nurses. Are you getting reports of more injuries and more deaths? Must be difficult to confirm as well.
Yes, we are getting reports of serious injuries and deaths, but we have not been able to independently verify because at lunchtime yesterday, there was a shutdown of the internet, particularly targeting blocking Facebook and WhatsApp. So it has been difficult to communicate with activists on the ground. But what we know is that there has been a relentless crackdown from the security forces who have been indiscriminate in their attacks on people, not only protesters, but including people who are going about their business in town. We know that today many shops remain closed, and public transport providers have also been too afraid to apply their normal routes because of the violence from the state security forces. And it is a huge concern that this is happening without much condemnation from the international community.
Yeah, and SADC in particular has been condemned for not acting sooner. We know that there's a delegation in Eswatini today. I want to ask you how much hope you have that SADC will come out with a strong plan of action. And what sort of action do you think we need to see from the international community to intervene in this country?
Well, to begin with, SADC should openly and publicly condemn the use of excessive force by the Eswatini authorities and should press the Eswatini government to address the issues of reforms and to respect human rights. We know that previously SADC has not decisively intervened. There has been a fact-finding mission to Eswatini from SADC, which was not comprehensive enough and which faced serious criticism. And we hope that this special envoy group that was dispatched today by President Ramaphosa will do a much better job, because they know that previously the Eswatini government was not cooperative, and there is need to engage all stakeholders on the ground, civil society groups, trade union leaders, political groupings, including in the opposition, to open up the space and ensure that there is democracy and human rights respect in Eswatini, and that there is no intransigence or arrogance in terms of dealing with the legitimate concerns that are coming from the people of Eswatini.
I mean, do you think that we should be looking at sanctions, for example? I mean, are we at that level? You say it's escalating. We've seen months of this bubbling and then erupting every now and then. You say it's escalating now. Are we at a point where the international community needs to be looking at serious action like that against the king?
Absolutely. I think it is time for the international community led by SADC to be very clear that there is zero tolerance to the loss of lives and gross human rights abuses and excessive use of force. The problem now is that as the people of Swaziland are suffering and being brutalized and being shot at with live ammunition, there has been no condemnation, no action from the international community. So if there is a very strong action, then it might deter the authorities. As I have said, today we have the Minister of Housing and Urban Development in Eswatini actually digging in and saying that he is now banning protests in towns and cities. So this is not something that is reflective of a government willing to engage. It is reflective of a government digging in and a government that needs to hear a clear message from the international community that these acts are condemned and cannot be allowed to go on without being challenged decisively.
Well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Dewa Mavhinga, Southern African Director of Human Rights Watch Africa.